None of you guys have your driver's license yet, so I want to give you a little bit of a tip. Maybe it's what you don't do, I'm not sure, but this is what I did. I was 16, I had just got my license, and I was driving to school, and I was like really close to being late. And so as I'm heading to school, I needed to go in the left turn lane, but the straight line was a little bit too long, but I saw a little space, and I'm like, I can make it through that space. Like I can squeeze through that space. I need to get in this left turn lane. And as I'm going, I'm squeezing through. I didn't realize exactly how much space I had. And so as I went by, my mirror, just my mirror on that side, like hit the side of this guy's car and just like, boom, made this noise, went in. I get in the left turn lane and I go down and the light turns red. And so I have to stop at this light. And in my rear view mirror, I see this guy pull in right behind me. Like he was going to go straight. And then he's like, dude, this dude just clipped my car, right? So he pulls in right behind me. He stops behind me, and I see him get out of his car and walk towards my door, okay? And so here's what I did. Okay, here's what I did. This is an advice you should take, but here's what I did. I didn't know what to do, so I got, and I found some sunglasses in my car. I put them on. I put the hood of my jacket on, and as he knocked on my window, the thought that occurred to me was at that moment, I needed to pretend like I didn't speak English. And so I rolled down the window and he's like, you hit my car. And I said in some really weird broken accent, which I'm not even going to do for you right now. I said, I don't speak English. And he's like, dude, you hit my car. And I was like, I don't know what you're talking about, right? Like I have no idea. I just pretended in that moment. I just realized I needed to become someone I'm not to fake this guy out, right? He got back in his car. We drove away, and it worked, all right? So maybe it's good advice, maybe it's not. I don't know. I'll let you decide on that one. But here's the thing. We learn from a very young age where we can be real and where we have to fake it. Where we can be ourselves, where we can be ourselves, we can cut loose, and where we have to pretend like we're someone we're not. And for many of you, and for a lot of people, that place that we have to fake it is church. Right? You feel like when you come to church, it's a place where you have to be someone that you're not, where you have to put on a mask, where you have to show people what you want them to see instead of who you are. And maybe you felt that before. Man, that resonates the most with me because I grew up in a church where I felt like I had to be perfect. And if I didn't show everyone else that I was perfect, then they were going to view me differently because of how I acted. Right? And I got really, really good at faking it. See, we're in a series right now that's called We Are, and we're talking about what we are about. Because if your job as a church is to invite friends, if you go out and you invite friends, you're going to hear people that are going to object. People are going to say things like, man, but the church is too judgmental. And we say, man, I know that. We understand that that's a stereotype, but we are loving. That's not who we are. And over the last 4 weeks, we've unpacked what we're going to be about. And we've talked about how we're going to be loving. We're going to be fresh. And then this week, man, what we're about, because the world says, in church, you just can't be yourself. We're going to talk about how that's not how Jesus wanted it to be. Right? That's not how Jesus set it up to be. Jesus was about something completely different. See, let me set this up. Jesus is talking to some of the religious people of the day. And as he's talking to them, Jesus starts calling them out. I love Jesus because he doesn't just let things slide. He's like, dude, I'm going to call it out right now. And so Jesus starts calling this dude out. He called out religious people who faked it that are a lot like religious people who fake it today. Right? A lot of people, maybe it's you. And you're going, I hope I don't discover who I am. This is what Jesus has to say to him. Matthew 23, verse 25, he says, woe to you, all right? Let me say, it's not like, whoa, what up? Like, you're awesome. It's like, whoa, like this is not good. Like, woe's upon you. Like, he's saying, woe to you, teachers of the laws and Pharisees, you hypocrites. You clean the outside of the cup and dish, but inside they are full of greed and self-indulgence. Let me ask you this. You ever been to someone's house before who didn't clean their dishes very well? Right? Like maybe you got a plate from their cupboard, they've set it out and it's like got a full like spaghetti noodle on it and you're like, how is this even possible? Like you got to clean this. Man, my in-laws, I love them. They're great people. They don't clean their dishes very well. Right? Like every time I'm at their house and I get a dish, whether it's like a fork or a plate or a cup, whatever I get, I like have to inspect it everywhere. I'm like, okay, like what disease am I going to catch today? Right? Like I got to inspect it to make sure that it's good. Okay? And if I get a cup and I'm like, I just want a glass of water. I get a cup out and there's like a stain or something on the outside of the cup. I'm like, okay, that's gross, but it's not that bad because the inside is clean, right? But if I take this cup and the outside's like super clean and I'm like, oh, it looks great, but I look inside and there's like this giant brown like glob of something. Like, I'm not going to drink out of that, right? That's disgusting. That's disgusting because the outside of the cup isn't what matters. What matters is the inside. And that's what Jesus is saying here to these Pharisees. He's saying, wait a sec, you clean the outside of the cup. You make everything look good to the outside, but inside, you're a mess. Right? This is often what we do. We try to make our outward appearance look so good, right? We say the right church things. Some of you guys know the right words to say. And when you're in church, when you're around church people, when you're in your community groups, you can talk a good game. And you say the right church things, right? Some of you know the right things to do when it comes to your face, right? You're like, I can smile at the right time. I can look serious at the right time. You can do the church game really well so that people on the outside look at you and they're like, man, this person's got it together. But on the inside, you're a mess. On the inside, you're dealing with things. On the inside, you're feeling like, man, I'm carrying this weight around, but I can't let anyone know. Verse 26, Jesus says, you blind Pharisees, first you clean the inside of the cup and dish, and then the outside will also be clean. Right? Quit being so concerned about the show that you're putting on and focus more on the inside. Focus more on the inside, not just what you're going to show everyone else. I was in college and I had to lead a discussion group in college. And so the next day was my presentation kind of where I'm leading this discussion. And so my friends called me that night as I'm preparing for it. I'm starting to study. I'm starting to learn the material. And they go, hey, do you want to come hang out tonight? So I'm like, okay, so I can either study and actually learn this stuff that I have to go in front of the class and lead a discussion, or I can go out with my friends. What do you think I did? I went with my friends, dude. I'm like, forget that. I ain't trying to study right now, right? So I went out with my friends instead of actually learning the material. And all my friends are like, dude, you'll be good. Just pretend like you know it. Just pretend like you know it, right? Just pretend. So I'm like, okay, I got this. So I got up there to lead the discussion group the next day. And as I sat up there, it took about 20 seconds before every person in the class realized I had no idea what I was talking about. See, my option was to actually learn it on the inside, to actually take time to learn it, to internalize it, to make it a part of who I was, and then it would have shown perfectly on the outside, or just fake it on the outside, and I got caught right away. See, that's what Jesus is saying right here. He's saying, wait, a true inside, a true clean outside, we're trying to clean up to show everyone else, it actually starts on the inside. It actually starts by truly believing it, truly becoming it. And when you do that, the show that you're putting on the outside doesn't matter because it already is going to be clean if you clean the inside, if you worry about the inside first. Jesus says, okay, you don't understand it yet? Let me say it a different way. And he says, woe to you. Again, right, he's calling them out. He's teachers of the law and Pharisees. He's like, you guys are hypocrites. You're like whitewashed tombs, which look beautiful on the outside, but on the inside, they're full of bones of the dead and everything unclean. Okay, let me explain this. So there was the custom of the day. The Jewish people, what they would do is they would paint the outside of the tombs white because during Passover, according to their law, if they touched these tombs, they would become unclean. And so there was like this warning, basically, they'd paint it white, and it's like, don't touch that because if you do, it's unclean. There it is. Don't accidentally even touch it. So all over Jerusalem, you had these white tombs that were painted everywhere. And honestly, it was beautiful. Like, it was pretty because there was all this like white tombs all over the hills and all over the side. And people were like, dude, it looks pretty awesome. Okay, it looks great. But even though because it was pretty on the outside, even though it looked great on the outside, it still contained dead people on the inside, right? The inside still contained dead people. Even though it looked great on the outside, it still contained dead people. And Jesus says this, he says in verse 28, in the same way, on the outside you appear as people as righteous, but on the inside you are full of hypocrisy and wickedness. See, the thing is, when you fake it, you might actually fool the people around you. Right? You might actually fool them. Right? Those tombs, when you looked at them, they were actually beautiful. They were actually pretty. But on the inside, they were a mess. See, you might fool people on the outside. I got really good at acting. Right? I got really good at putting on the act. See, I grew up, and I've told you guys this before, I grew up at a church where our pastor, man, when his hair went gray, it didn't go gray, it like went silver. Like the man was literally perfect. I was like, how did you do that? Right? He wore a perfect suit every week. And I thought, growing up, in order to be accepted, I too had to be perfect. And I would go to church every week and try to do the right things and try to say the right things. And I got really, really good at it. I got really good at it. Man, I faked out my leaders. I faked out the youth pastor, all my friends. They thought I was awesome, and I was a student leader. Not only was I a student leader, I got an opportunity to get on stage, and I was in a really big youth group, and so it was a privilege for me to be able to do this. And as I continued to grow and continue to look better and better, I kept continuing to feel worse and worse because on the inside, that's not who I was. I got really good at the act. And people would come up and tell me how awesome I was, and I'm like, oh, that's awesome, that's good. And so I knew I couldn't share what was really going on. But as I walked off stage in front of people, as I got left the church where I'd smile and where everyone thought that I was this great church kid, I would go home. And I was dealing with so many anger issues that I would literally punch holes in the wall. And I couldn't contain my anger. I would get on the computer for hours. I would look at stuff that I knew I shouldn't look at, that I knew I shouldn't be doing. And I would be there. But I would never let anyone in to know the real me because I had to act down. And I got really good at fooling people. The problem is this: you will fool people, you will never fool God. You might be really good at your act, and the people around you, even your parents, are like, man, my kid is a saint. But when it comes to fooling God, that's never going to happen. And the problem with this whole thing is that the only one that actually matters is God. The only one that matters is God. It doesn't matter about our show on the outside. It doesn't matter of our outward appearance. The only thing that matters is what God sees. And God wants the real you, which is why here for us, if you're wondering what our word is that we're going to be talking about, we are real. We are real. We're going to be a place where you can be yourself. You can be real, and you don't have to fake it. You don't have to pretend like someone you're not. You don't have to pretend like you're perfect, because guess what? We're all a mess. Every single one of us has messed up. You don't have to come in pretending that you're perfect, because the person next to you and the person standing in front of you, me, is not perfect, so you don't have to be. I will never stand up here and pretend like I've got it all together. I will tell you that I'm a mess. I will tell you when I mess up. I will tell you that you shouldn't even follow me because I'm a mess. But the reason that we can all come in here is because we follow someone who is perfect, and it's Jesus. And we can come in under that, and we can be ourself, right? We're going to be real here. And I get that's kind of ambiguous. That's kind of like, well, what does that mean? Be real? Awesome. So I'm going to break it down. Here's what it means. Okay, first is this. We need to be real with ourselves. Be real with yourself. And for some of you, you're confused because you're like, wait, aren't I always real with myself? Actually, we lie to ourselves the most. We actually lie to ourselves the most. Right? Here's what being real with yourself means. It means seeing yourself the way that Jesus sees you. It means looking at yourself and seeing yourself the way that Jesus sees you when he looks at you. So how does Jesus see you? First, Jesus sees that you are amazing. You are amazing, okay? Some of you in here, you don't have a hard time believing that, right? You wake up and you look in the mirror and you're like, oh, dang. Right? Some of you look in the mirror in the morning and you're just like, oh, God. Great job, right? Some of you, you're arrogant, right? You're arrogant. Maybe that's you. But for most of you in here, if you're honest, that's not you. Most of you wake up and you look in the mirror and you're like, what happened to my face in the night, right? Like you got zits popping up and you're like, that wasn't there, right? Like I'm going to see the guy that I like. I'm going to see the girl that I like. And I got like Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer going on, right? And you're like, how is this even possible, right? It's always like picture day. You wake up and your hair will not do what it's supposed to. It's just like, and you're like, what, right? I don't know about that. I don't have hair. But for some of you, right, you're like that's your deal. And you're like, I don't feel amazing. You look and you're like, I would change my weight. I would change my height. I would change my nose. I would change my ears. All of you have different things that you're saying, I don't like this about myself. We don't feel amazing, but when Jesus looks at us, he says, man, you are amazing. And we need to start believing that about ourselves. But for a lot of you, you're like, wait a second. If I'm so amazing, how come we don't feel like it? And here's why. Because even though you're amazing, you're a mess. You've been messed up by this thing called sin. What sin is simply anything that goes against God's standard. And every single one of us has done stuff that goes against God's standard. We've all sinned. And so, yes, we're amazing. Yes, you are awesome. You're created in the image of God, but you're also a mess because of sin. And being real with yourself is admitting that to yourself, is getting to a spot where you can go, man, I am not right. There's something wrong, and it's not how I was made. It's what I've done that has messed up this relationship. You've got to get to a point where you're real with yourself in that. But there's a missing piece here. This is the last part of being real with yourself. Yes, you're amazing. Yes, you're a mess. But you're also deeply loved by God. You're deeply loved by God. And I think this is the only way to illustrate this, because when we're a mess, we see that we're a mess, and we see, I've never done anything to prove to God that I'm good, so how can I be good? Here's what it's like, man. Anyone seen a brand new baby when they're first born? Like when they first come out? I'm not talking like 2 months old. I'm talking like brand new, right? Those things are ugly, right? Those things are ugly. They come out and like parents are like, oh, look at my pretty baby. And you're like, oh, we ain't looking at the same thing, right? Like that thing they kind of look like a naked mole rat, right? You know what I'm talking about? Like they're like not the right color. And their head is like, I remember when I was in the hospital when my daughters were born and they handed me this baby and I looked at her and she was like a cone head. I was like, oh my goodness, we have an alien, right? Like this is crazy. And I'm looking at her, she's like purple and all these colors, and I'm like, that's not a human color. That's awesome. And I looked at her, and she had like gunk on her, and she was a mess. And as I looked at this baby that was a mess, this baby that had never done anything for me, right? This kid doesn't pay the rent. This kid doesn't do dishes. This kid doesn't, they've never done anything for me, and they're a mess. And at the moment when I looked at this little mess who's never done anything for me, the only thought that I had is that I was deeply in love with that child. And it didn't matter what they looked like. It didn't matter what they'd done. It didn't matter how much of a mess they were. I was so in love with that child. And listen right now, if you don't hear anything else, that is exactly how God looks at you. He sees your mess of your life. He sees the mess of what you've gone through. He sees the mess of who you are. He knows that you've never done anything for him to win his approval. But when he looks at you, he says, man, you are amazing, and I'm deeply in love with you. See, if you're real with yourself, you have to understand that. You have to understand your standing with that. See, religious people that Jesus was talking to, they thought that pretending on the outside was all that they needed, but they were lying to themselves. They weren't even being real with themselves. And Jesus said, wait a sec, you got to be real. Okay, we got to be real with ourselves. Next is this, is we have to be real with God. Okay, we have to be real with God. Real with God is this, it's saying no to religion. And some of you are like, wait a second, I'm at a church and you're a pastor and you're telling me not to be religious. Like, what is happening right now? That's like, and I will tell you over and over, if you're confused, don't be religious, because Jesus said it over and over, because religion is not what is going to save you. Religion is not what is going to win you God's approval. Religion is none of those things. Right? That's exactly what the Pharisees and religious leaders tried to do, is that they were like, man, we're going to make our faith all about these religious acts. If we show up to church, if we show up to community group, if we say the right things, if we do the right things, then we're good with God. Okay, but being real with God is actually totally different. It's saying yes to Jesus. It's not doing something for God, it's saying yes to Jesus. And here's why. It's not about what you do for God, it's about what Jesus did for you. I'm going to say that again because I don't think that you guys got that, okay? It's not about what you do for God. It's about what Jesus did for you. It's already done. You don't have to try to win approval. When you're real with God, you realize that being real with God is being real with Jesus. It's accepting Jesus. If you want to be real with God, you got to accept Jesus, because that's the only way to be real with him. And once you've done that, it's giving God the real you. See, some of you in here, what you do with God is the same thing you do when you come to church, is you put up these walls and you say, okay, you can see what I want you to see, but I'm going to guard the real me. Okay, it's kind of like this. Let me just explain it like this, okay? It's kind of like if you lived in a cardboard box, okay? Not like you have a home, like you actually have a house. Maybe you have like a little head hole. You can poke your head out, right? And you're like, hey, this is where I live, right? You live in a house, but you live in a cardboard box. Just pretend with me that this is you, and you do your whole life living in a cardboard box, and you're like, okay, I want to protect what's in here. I don't want people to know, like, I want to be safe or whatever, and you're kind of like, I'm in this cardboard box, and you do life in this cardboard box, so it's kind of hard, right? You're like bumping into things. You're like, okay, this isn't good. Like, sleeping is really not easy, right? There's like one way you can sleep, and if you roll over, like, you can't, right? So that's your life. You're like stuck in this cardboard box. But then what if one day, as you're living in this cardboard box and you're trying to like do life and you're trying to experience life, you realize something. You realize, okay, you know what? I'm going to be real. I'm going to be vulnerable. I'm going to be real, and I'm going to take off this cardboard box, because I know this is what I'm trying to show everyone, but I want to just take it off. And as you take it off, you're able to realize, wait a second, with this gone, when I'm not wearing this, I can move around. Like, I can actually like hug people. I can actually like run. I can sit, and you start discovering these things about yourself that you never knew because you were so guarded and you lived in a cardboard box. And as you lived in that box, you would never have known that. And some of you are like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. That's the dumbest analogy, but here's the truth. A lot of you, when it comes to your relationship with God, you've been guarded so much that you've never experienced the freedom that God has for you when you're able to be real with him. And what you experience when you're able to be real with him is you discover things about you. You discover gifts, you discover talents, you discover things that you have been given by God for him that you would never know unless you're able to be open in front of him, unless you're able to be real with him. And when you're able to do that, it changes everything. So you got to get real with God. You're freed up to truly live for him when you're real with him. You got to be real with yourself. You got to be real with God. And last is this, is you got to be real with others. Real with others. See, we're so good at faking it to others. Be honest right now. Be honest. Just show of hands, okay? I know it's hard. Be honest right now. Anyone in here ever gotten in a fight in the car on the way to church? On the way to church. Like on the way to God's holy house, you've gotten on a fight with your parents, with your siblings. All right, look at you. Good job being honest, okay? Good job being honest. I remember growing up, going to church. And I was on the way to church, man, and it was like Christian church, praise God, Sunday, and my sister and I are in the backseat, and we are fighting like crazy, like screaming at each other, right? My parents are fighting with each other, and they're fighting with us. We're all just yelling. It's like World War III in our car. All right, it's like going down, and we're going to church, man. And my sister, she's like scratching my face, like she had these fingernails that were like super long. It was not good, right? And I get to church, and I remember my parents. We stopped the car, we got in our parking spot, we put the car in park, and they look back at me and they're like, "You will go in there, and you will be happy." I'm like, okay. Right, so we get out of the car, and we're like walking in, and we're all like I'm putting my face back together, right? And we're all like yelling. We're still kind of mad, and we see a parking lot greeter in the parking lot, and they stop us, and they're like, "How you doing this morning?" And all of us at the same time, right? We just got done with World War III, remember? All of us at the same time, we put this smile on. We're doing great, praise the Lord. Right, and we walked a little bit further, and inside I'm like, I want to kill my sister, right? And I was like still angry, and we get to the next greeter at the door, and they're like, "How's it going this morning?" And we're like, "It's going great, praise Jesus." Right, see, some of you guys get so good at faking it with other people that you will never let them know what's truly going on inside of you. And when you walk in the doors of a church, or when you walk in a community group, or when you're with people around you that are Christians, that believe what you believe, you will never let them in to know what's actually going on. And if you're going to be real, it means being real with others. And it means a few things. It means first you need to be able to confront people and have them confront you if you're going to be real. Right, I'm not talking like get angry and yell at them and like beat them over the head with truth and be mean about it. I'm talking in love, going to somebody that you love and telling them, "Hey, the thing that you're doing, I think is driving you away from God, and I want to help you be the best you." Being real with others is being honest with them, right? It doesn't give you a free pass to be a jerk, you know what I'm saying? People are like, "I'm just being real." And you're like, "No, you're just being a jerk," right? It's not doing that. What it is, though, is it's being honest with other people, and check it out, allowing them to be honest with you. Because here's the part that we miss. Most of you, if some of your friends or the people around you told you the truth of something that you're doing, what you would do is then you would shut that person out of your life instead of allowing them to be real with you and helping you be real with yourself. Being real with others means confronting. It also means this, and this is really hard, it means confessing. See, it says in James 5, verse 16, "Therefore confess your sins to each other and pray for each other so that you may be healed." See, God is the only one that can actually forgive you. But God, when he forgives you, when he forgives your sins, you can still be forgiven and not set free. You can be forgiven and still have the weight of that sin on your shoulders, the weight of the darkness inside of you. And here's how that goes away. It's healed when you share it with somebody else. Because you still have that darkness, and the way that you get rid of darkness is by shining light on it. And the only way to shine light on it is to bring someone else in on it. You can be saved and not set free. You need to confess to other people. You need to be able to go, "Okay, I want to be real right now. And I'm going to be able to tell you what's truly going on because you're a mess too." And if you're real, you're able to take that and not go, "Oh man, I can't believe you did that," and judge them, but you're able to love them and go, "Man, I'm in the same boat because we're all a mess." If you're going to be real with others, that also means sharing. It means sharing with others about Jesus. Okay, you cannot tell your friends that you're real with them if you haven't gotten the most real by telling them about Jesus. See, some of you guys, you'll do shout outs on Instagram for their birthday, and you're like, they're my bestie, yeah, my best friend, right? But you've never told them about Jesus, and what you're really saying is, I want you to spend eternity away from God. And what you're saying is basically, I hate you. And you're like, no, I would never say that to my friends. But if you're not being real with them by sharing Jesus with them, that's what you've said. We got to be real with ourselves. We got to be real with God. We got to be real with others, and that's the place that we want to create here. But it starts with you. It starts with you, and some of you in here, you need to get real today. Don't let today pass. Some of you need to get real with God. Some of you need to get real with yourself and quit lying to yourself. Some of you need to quit putting on the fake face for everyone else and get real with others. And a lot of you in here, I'm just going to be honest, a lot of you in here need to get real with all three. All three of those need to happen in your life, and you need to get real. So don't let today pass without making that commitment, without making that change. We're going to have the band come, and they're going to finish us out with worship. But what I want you to know is that we are real. This is an environment where you can come, where you can invite friends. And when you come here, you don't have to put on that fake face. We understand that stereotype exists. We get that that's what the church is all about. But we don't want to be that stereotype. Jesus said, that's not what I'm here for. And so I want you guys to get real today. Would you guys bow your heads?